Hi, Podheads. Welcome to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm Kylie Caldwell.
This is Kate Carter.
And I'm Holly Lamoureux.
Today, I'm bringing you an oldie but one full of bad suspects, theories, conspiracies, and even Elvis Presley himself. On the night of December 28th, 1956, two sisters went out to see their 11th showing of Elvis's movie Love Me Tender, but they never returned home safely. Their disappearance and eventual murder investigation turned into the biggest missing persons case in Chicago history. This is the story of the Grimes sisters. Let's get into it.
Okay, so I did not know this one.
It doesn't sound familiar.
I kind of stumbled upon this one and I was looking into another case and I was surprised I hadn't heard of it either. We're all going to learn today. So, our story today revolves around the disappearance and murder of sisters Barbara and Patricia. At the time of their disappearance, Barbara was 15 and Patricia was 3 years younger, only a few days away from her 13th birthday, so 12. Despite the age difference, both girls were described as inseparable, the best of friends, and what they bonded most over was their love of Elvis Presley. On the Friday night of December 28th, 1956, the two sisters left home after dinner to go see Elvis's starring role in Love Me Tender for the 11th time. Yes, I said the 11th time. Like most teenagers back in 1956, Elvis was everything, and the sisters were obsessed. So they had dinner with their mom, Loretta, and four other siblings and head out around 7:30 p.m. from their home on South Damon Avenue. The sisters promised their mom they would be home by 11:45 p.m. as usual and left with $2.50, which is about $30 now. The money would cover the first screening of the film, some popcorn, an extra 50 cents in case they wanted to stay for their second screening, and a bus back home. They walked the mile and a half to Brighton Theater just in time for the first showing. The classmate of Patricia later told investigators she sat behind the sisters during the movie, and when she left around 9:30 p.m., the two were in line for popcorn. That classmate, Dorothy Weinert, said they were in good spirits, nothing to note. The girls did stay for the second screening, just couldn't get enough Elvis. Roger Menard also sat behind the sisters at the theater and left 1 minute before them. He saw them walk down Archer Avenue, stop and talk to someone in a green Buick, and then continue walking. When Roger turned down 42nd Street, he was behind the girls again. A black 1949 Mercury with two teenage boys pulled up. It seemed like they chatted for a second. The girls giggled, but the Grimes sisters kept walking. They did not get in the car. That car, at least. Later, several people, including a bus driver, told authorities that the sisters boarded the Chicago Transit Authority bus on Archer Avenue, which was back where Roger first saw them after the movie. All these bus reporters said the girls got off at 11:05 p.m. on Western Avenue, which is halfway between the theater and their house. If it was in fact the girls, why they would get off there and not take the bus closer to the house, we don't know. There was another reported sighting around 11:30 p.m. that night by Ed Lauren and Earl Zastro, who later told police that they saw the sisters near Sealy and Damon Avenues, about 2 blocks away from their homes. The boys were driving through the area and saw the girls giggling and jumping out of doorways at each other, distinctly remembering the moment because one of them turned to the other and said that was, quote, those two Grimes sisters, end quote. When Earl later reported this sighting to investigators, it was not met with gratitude for narrowing down the girls' movements. Instead, Earl Zastro became a suspect. Officers continually pulled him out of class to interrogate him, threatening him with physical violence to confess. At one point, an officer accused Earl of hiding the girls in one of his dad's freezers. And there was no basis for even thinking Earl or Ed had any involvement other than the fact that they reported seeing the sisters that night. But back at home, Mom Loretta stayed up and was waiting for the girls, expecting them to walk in at 11:45 p.m. like they always did, and how they promised. But by midnight, the girls weren't home, and Loretta started to get anxious. So in the house, we have Loretta and all the kids. There's six to be exact. Loretta sent two of the older siblings, Teresa and Joey, to go wait for Patricia and Barbara at the bus stop while she stayed home with the other kids and started to call around to their friends' houses just to check to see if they went home with them. The siblings waited at the nearby bus stop, the one that the girls always used, and they waited and they waited. Three different buses came by and dropped passengers off, but none of them were Patricia and Barbara. Teresa and Joey started to get just as worried as their mother, and they rushed home to tell her the girls weren't there. By 2:15 a.m. on the 29th, Loretta had officially filed a missing persons report at the Chicago Police Department for her two daughters. Luckily, this report was taken very seriously. Almost immediately, a full citywide search was underway with hundreds of officers assigned to work this case full time. They had all the Chicago officers, Cook County Sheriff's Department, and even officers from nearby counties pitching in, going from door to door. There were also countless volunteers who joined the ground search and passed out nearly 15,000 flyers. Canals and rivers were dredged. 300,000 people were questioned, and nearly 2,000 people underwent what they call serious interrogation. Literally leaving no stone unturned. I think they talked to pretty much everyone in Chicago.
That and it is an absurd amount of people, like number wise, if you actually think about that.
300,000. And they said question, and I'm assuming they did not bring in 300,000 people and like interview them. They at least an officer talked to at least 300,000 people.
Yeah, but still, like, do you think that they tracked every single number, or do you think that was kind of like made up?
I bet they tracked.
They might have tracked because we have a lot of witnesses and witness statements in this story. It was like full names, full details. The paperwork was very diligent here.
Wow.
All of the sightings were taken into account. I talked about a few at the theater and immediately following, but there are more people that report seeing the girls all the way up into January 9th. Remember, the girls went missing on December 28th. The first one we'll get into, I personally don't think are the sisters for a few reasons. So this is from Daniel Eshelman, a truck driver who was parked on Archer Avenue by the theater that night. He later reported that he saw two girls resembling the sisters get into a dark colored car with three men right there in front of his truck. The reason why I'm not leaning on these two girls being Barbara and Patricia is because we have the other sightings of them on the other side of town or on the bus at the same time by people who actually knew them. A security guard named Jack Franklin reported seeing them on the morning of the 29th, about 12 hours after they left the theater. He said he gave the two girls directions and he remembered them because they were apparently rude. A friend of Barbara named Judy Barrow reported seeing them walking west on Archer Avenue at around 2:30 p.m. on the 29th. And a few hours later, a classmate of Patricia saw her walk past the restaurant she was dining at with two girls, none of which were her sister Barbara or that the classmate recognized. There was a second truck driver who saw them on 71st Street late on the 29th, a cashier at the Clark Theater who saw them on the 30th, and a clerk at the Claremont Hotel who said they checked in there on the 30th. So officers are getting a lot of conflicting reports, as you can see. They walked home, they got on the bus, they got into someone's car, they're 2 blocks away from home, then they're on the other side of town checking into a hotel. But some of these reports investigators take pretty seriously. They're coming from people who really knew the sisters. It wasn't like reports of seeing two girls who may look like them on the poster. There were classmates and friends saying, no, I definitely saw my friend Barbara or Patricia here at this time. About a week of searching goes by with no real clues, and investigators change their tune. They went from possible abduction to a new theory. The girls probably ran away. They're staying with some boyfriends that no one knows about, or perhaps because they were so obsessed with Elvis, they went to Nashville to see him in concert.
So, runaways.
It's always runaway,
Yeah.
obviously. And the kicker is the girls left the house with $2.50, and that's before they paid for the movies and popcorn and possibly a bus home. So I don't know how that would last several days gallivanting around town, let alone getting to Nashville. But okay.
No, especially like these days, you can't even afford popcorn with that.
Popcorn's $30 now.
It's absolutely absurd.
To be fair, there were 2 reported sightings of the girls in Nashville. A woman named Pearl Neville told investigators she met the sisters in a bathroom in Nashville on January 9th. She accompanied them to a state employment agency saying they were looking for work. Investigators did go to the employment agency and talk to one of the clerks, and that clerk did identify the Grimes sisters as the girls that came in. She also said that they used the surname Grimes on the application paperwork. So all the sources I read, just the clerk said they used that name. I have no idea if these forms were ever located and verified to say Grimes. But investigators are looking into this as a strong possibility that the girls went to Nashville to see Elvis after parading around town. Of course, close friends and family weren't buying this. Barbara and Patricia weren't even the type of kids to be late getting home past curfew. They didn't talk to strangers. They definitely did not hitchhike to Nashville on a whim. Just in case they did, though, Elvis Presley himself decided to help out. On January 19th, 1957, he released a televised and radio statement from Graceland, urging the girls to go home, saying, quote, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries," end quote. I searched far and wide for this clip. Couldn't find it, unfortunately. But once this aired, an anonymous letter showed up at the Chicago Sun-Times. The letter came from someone who claimed to have seen the girls being forced into a car by a young male at the theater that night, and they had a partial license plate number. In part, the letter says, quote, "A man about 22 or 25 was talking to them. He pushed Barbara in the backseat of the car and Pat in the front seat. We got part of the license number as the car drove by us. The first four numbers were 2184, end quote. Police have never been able to track down this car or the author of the letter. So while investigators were kind of banking on this runaway theory, I am happy to report that they didn't just drop everything else. Other theories and leads were looked into, mainly because ransom notes started to show up. On January 12th, Mom Loretta was taken to Milwaukee alongside FBI agents per the instructions of one of these notes. The note said to drop an envelope of $1,000 on a pew of a Catholic church there. Barbara would walk in, collect the money, deliver it, and then return with Patricia. The money was dropped off, but neither sister ever showed up. This note was later found to have come from an institutionalized mental patient, which I don't know why his outgoing mail was not screened.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Early in the morning of January 14th, another call came in, but this time it wasn't to Loretta. A classmate and friend of Patricia named Sandra Tolston got two calls to her house that morning. In the first call, her mom picked up and no one spoke for several seconds. She hung up, thinking nothing of it. 15 minutes later, another call came in. This time, Mom Ann heard what she described as a young, frightened girl who said, quote, "Is that you, Sandra? Is Sandra there?" End quote. Before Ann could get her daughter Sandra to the phone, the call disconnected. Ann believes wholeheartedly that it was Patricia who called. There were also psychics calling in. On the 15th, the guy called into the police complaint room saying he had a revelation. The Grimes sisters were dead in Santa Fe Park. He then hung up before giving a name. We'll get more into the psychic later because exactly 1 week later, the bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes were found only 1 mile away from where the psychic said they were.
Ooh, I love a good psychic reading.
It was January 22nd, 1957, 25 days after going missing, when Leonard Prescott saw flesh-colored things behind a guardrail on German Church Road, heading into town to buy groceries. Like all great true crime stories, he thought at first they were mannequins. He went home, told his wife about it, and she was like, maybe we should go double check. It's always the nosy wife. But the wife stepped over the guardrail on the bridge above Devil's Creek and immediately fainted when she saw them. They, of course, were not mannequins, but the nude bodies of two young girls. The Willow Springs Police Department arrived quickly after getting the call and were shortly after followed by Joseph Grimes, the girl's dad. And this is the only part in the story that has like any source mentioned the dad, Joseph, but the gist is parents are divorced. I believe all the kids live with mom, Loretta. There's like no mention of him anywhere else. I don't know how involved he was in any of this, but about 15 miles from the theater, Barbara was lying on her left side with her legs slightly bent up towards her torso. Patricia was lying on her back with her body covering Barbara's head. Once Barbara's face was revealed, officers could see blunt force trauma on her head and face. She also had 3 wounds on her chest, which they immediately thought resembled stab wounds from an ice pick. Patricia also had multiple bruises on her face and across her body. After the girls were positively identified by their dad, around 160 officers arrived at the scene and started searching for more evidence and clues, walking alongside each other for miles in every direction. Nothing was ever really found, no murder weapon, no suspicious items, and none of the girls' clothing or belongings, which, by the way, has still not been found to this day.
Oh, wow.
Investigators quickly realized their theory of the girls running away to Nashville was wrong. They were also quickly reminded of another case that occurred 2 years earlier. On October 18th, 1955, the nude bodies of three young boys were found near a river, seemingly thrown from a car like Barbara and Patricia. The boys were identified as 13-year-old John Schuessler, his 11-year-old brother Anton, and friend 13-year-old Robert Peterson. The cause of death for all three was strangulation. Along with the circumstances in which the bodies were found, the biggest "oh shit, this sounds familiar" or red flag was that the boys had gone missing after going to the movies. On October 16th, 1955, to be specific, John, Anton, and Robert went to see Disney's The African Lion and didn't return home by the agreed upon curfew.
Was it the same theater?
It was not.
Okay, just curious, because then that would be obviously very weird.
At that point, it'd be like, okay, they're definitely connected.
Yeah.
All three bodies were piled onto each other, just like Barbara and Patricia were. Also, just like this case, no evidence or clothing of the victims have ever been found. And it wasn't until 1970 did officers have a solid theory and suspect, and his name was Kenneth Hansen. That year, an entirely separate department were investigating an arson at Helen Voorhees Ranch when informants told them about then 22-year-old Kenneth Hansen, who they said murdered some boys at the rival stables, Idle Hour Stables. Kenneth wasn't charged with the arson until 1994, but back in 1955, an autopsy showed that all three boys had hay or evidence of hay in their lungs, backing the informant's reports of the boys being at some sort of stable. The theory was that Kenneth Hansen picked up the boys from a nearby bowling alley, one that Robert loved to go to, in the first place his dad checked when he didn't get home on time. The theory continues with assuming Kenneth lured the boys in with the idea of going to the stables to see the horses, and after that, we don't really know. There are reports of theories that Kenneth Hansen attacked one or two or even all three boys. Maybe they fought back, but either way, the story ends the same way. Kenneth Hansen was found guilty of their murders. 5 years later, the case was overturned after ruling that evidence of Kenneth cruising for hookups should have been stricken. In 2004, Kenneth was retried and found guilty once again, being sentenced to 200 to 300 years. But only 3 years after receiving this sentence, in 2007, Kenneth Hansen died of natural causes in prison.
Does someone beating you to death in prison consider natural causes?
Technically, no.
No, but
A result of your actions, maybe kind of natural.
A natural consequence.
A natural consequence, yes.
So, investigators are looking at the Grimes sisters' crime scene, having flashbacks, but at the same time considering the difference in victim profiles. Yeah, same age, but different genders. And serial predators, killers rarely switch up on the gender of their victim, especially if it's sexually motivated, which they're clearly leaning towards since all of these victims were found nude. Which leads us back to the next big lead, the psychic who called into the police department reporting a revelation that the sisters were dead 1 mile away from where they were found. Luckily, somehow in the 50s, the operator was able to trace the call to Green's Liquor Market. And then somehow again, they were able to trace that call to Walter Crayons, who lived nearby. And immediately he was suspect number one. 53-year-old Walter claimed that a lot of his family members and ancestors were psychic and that he simply had a vision of the girls being dead in Santa Fe Park after a night of drinking. Officers interrogated Walter several times, and every time Walter simply denied any involvement. He was just psychic. At one point, handwriting experts couldn't rule out his handwriting as the same as a ransom note that was sent to Loretta weeks before. So it wasn't like 100% a match, but couldn't exactly rule him out. But investigators had nothing, and Walter Crayons ended up being released without charges. Going off tips and witness statements wasn't getting investigators anywhere, so they hoped the autopsies would provide more clues. Unfortunately, though, this caused even more confusion. On January 23rd, 3 experienced pathologists completed the autopsies, but they were unable to reach an agreement on several things, including the time of death and the cause of death. The listed cause of death is shock and exposure, aka being out in the cold with no clothes. There weren't any obvious fatal wounds. What officers thought were stabs from an ice pick were determined to have most likely been from rodents and inflicted post-mortem. And the wounds were superficial, so not deep enough at all to be fatal, just barely scratched the surface.
would it be considered hypothermia?
That's what they think, yeah.
With no, I mean, obviously they didn't have clothes on, but where'd the clothes go?
We don't know.
Wh- Why would they have done any of this? Did they run a toxology report? I mean, I assume they did, but did you find results of that?
Yep, no alcohol, no drugs, no poisons. So the only way the pathologists got to shock and exposure was because they basically ruled out every other option. They weren't like 100% sure, like, oh, it's shock and exposure hypothermia, but they basically ruled everything else out. So they're like, okay, well, then it has to be that. And the only indication that the girls had been murdered was the fact that they were far outside of town with no clothes, which haven't been located. And here's where things get more confusing because we have investigators fighting over their opposite theories. The pathologists who performed the autopsies put in their reports that the girls were likely murdered late on December 28th or early on the 29th, right after they left the theater. And they came to this conclusion by matching their stomach contents with what we know was their last meal at home before the theater and the popcorn at the theater. In short, the girls were taken shortly after leaving the theater, murdered in some way, and had been lying behind the guardrail ever since, hidden by heavy snow. But the chief investigator of the Cook County Coroner's Office disagrees with all of this. His name is Harry Gloss. So Harry has counterpoints to basically everything. He said there were numerous, quote, marks of violence on those girls' faces, end quote, more indicative of violence as opposed to post-mortem rodent bites. He also said Barbara had curdled milk in her stomach, which she was not have known to drink at home or at the theater. He also said both girls had signs of sexual intercourse. Whether that was consensual or not, we don't know. But he claims both girls' vaginal fluid swabs showed semen. None of this is in the original autopsy reports, and Harry believes he knows why. He claimed that investigators refused to disclose this information to protect their reputation, should it have been consensual, and or to spare their mom's feelings. An assistant to the sheriff corroborated all this, saying he saw the autopsy slides and he agreed both girls had been molested. When Harry Gloss brought these things up and later refused to recant his statements, he was fired by coroner Walter McCarran. Don't worry though. Later on, Harry Gloss ended up being deputized by Sheriff Lohman, who agreed with his theory. He also believed that the girls had been lured and abducted by a sexual predator who beat them. So, who was this predator that they're looking for? Well, one of the guys brought in and interrogated out of the 2000 was 17-year-old Max Fleeg. I have no idea on how police landed on Max. There's like no information on him out there. But at some point, the Chicago police captain persuaded and or coerced Max into taking a polygraph. You know how we feel about those. But in Illinois, juveniles aren't subject to polygraph test. And allegedly, during this involuntary polygraph test, Captain Ralph said Max confessed to the murders. No idea on how he confessed. Like, did he just start confessing and telling a story, or did he quote unquote fail the polygraph? No idea. Either way, police were pretty much forced to release Max without charges due to the lack of evidence and his alleged confession not being admissible in court. Maybe there was something off about Max, though, because later that same year, Max was charged with the murder of 14-year-old Mary Lou Wagner. One article said the two were on a date, another said Mary resisted his advances. But either way, Max ended up beating Mary to death with a rolling pin from his dad's bakery. Her body was later found in a pond after Max led police there. Max Fleeg ended up being sentenced to life in prison, and he died there in 2007. The suspect that comes up the most, and who the chief investigator Harry Gloss believes is responsible, was then 21-year-old Edward Bedwell. Edward was a semi literate drifter originally from Tennessee, just bouncing around, getting into trouble when he wasn't working as a dishwasher. It was the owners of the restaurant he worked at, John and Minnie Duros, who, along with a customer, reported to police that Edward and one of his friends were at the restaurant with the Grimes sisters early in the morning on the 30th of December. According to Minnie Duros, Edward and one of his friends, who she didn't know, were sitting in a booth with the sisters listening to Elvis songs before going outside. She further said, quote, the taller girl returned and sat in the booth and put her head on the table. They wanted her to get into a car, but she didn't want to. The other girl and the two men came back later, and I told them to leave the girl alone. She's sick. But they all left anyway. On their way out, Barbara said they were sisters, end quote. Police are like, And then they realized who Edward Bedwell looked like. Elvis. So the same day they got this report from the restaurant, they arrested Edward. Like, just immediately arrested him for looking like Elvis. And they interrogated him for 3 days straight. At first, Edward was not having it. They were mistaken. He and his friend William Willingham, great name, were there with two other girls. They were not the Grimes sisters. Over the course of those 3 days, an interrogation where who knows what happened, Edward Bedwell ended up confessing to the murders. He reenacted the crime at the scene where the girls were found by Devil's Creek and signed a 14-page confession. In the confession, Edward attested to the fact that he and William Willingham had been drinking with Barbara and Patricia from the 30th until January 7th at various bars on Skid Row, which is on West Madison Street. On the 7th, after having hot dogs, Edward beat the girls and threw their nude bodies into the snow after they refused his advances. Hot dogs. On January 7th, no hot dogs found in their stomach. Also, they believe they've been dead since the 28th or 29th. That might be a spoiler alert. The same day he signed this confession, Edward was formally charged with 2 counts of murder. Almost immediately, though, Mom Loretta knew he wasn't the man who killed her daughters. She read the confession and told the media, quote, "It's a lie. My girls wouldn't be on West Madison Street. They didn't even know where it was," end quote. Everyone else who knew the girls backed this up. The girls didn't go to bars. They didn't drink. They were young and they looked it. So for one, they wouldn't have been served. Secondly, all their friends are saying, hell no, we play with dolls and play dress up. These aren't little girls going out to bars. We also have more concrete evidence that shows Edward's confession isn't true. Of course, we have their last meal was their dinner at home and popcorn at the theater. No evidence of hot dogs or alcohol in their system. Also, the girls weren't beaten to death. They had bruises, but none of their wounds were fatal. Even more undeniable, Edward Bedwell was clocked into work at the Ajax Consolidated Company from 4:19 p.m. on December 28th until 12:30 a.m. on the 29th, which covers the time that the girls had already gone missing. And the day he said he murdered the girls, January 7th, Edward was clocked into work on the other side of town. Police also talked to William Willingham, the guy who was with Edward at the restaurant, and he confirmed that the 2 girls they were with weren't the Grimes sisters. Those 2 girls, who did later come to police and say it was probably them, were 19-year-old Irene Dean and 18-year-old Carol King. Carol was on a date with William, and Irene was on a date with Eddie. On January 31st, Edward Bedwell formally recanted his confession during a habeas corpus hearing, stating he was forced to sign the confession due to threats, bribery, and physical violence. On February 6th, he was freed on bond, which was paid for by an anonymous donor, and by March 4th, all charges were dropped due to all the inconsistencies. Edward was also officially classified as being intellectually disabled. He wasn't exactly free, though, because as he was walking out of the courtroom, he was arrested again, this time for the rape of a 13-year-old girl in Florida. So this was a complete surprise to Edward and his attorney. The Chicago police had this all arranged, though. Edward did go to trial for this rape charge, where he claimed that the sex was consensual and the girl had told him she was 18. The jury deliberated for only 25 minutes, and by the end of that, Edward Bedwell was found not guilty of statutory rape.
I don't want to say that poor man, but like, can you imagine? It always kills me when people are released from jail or prison, and then as they're walking to their car, they get arrested again. Like, what a mind fuck, you know? Like, that would just totally your roller coaster of emotions.
It's got to be like absolute torture. So some reports said Edward died in like 1972. Others say he had weapons charges in the 80s or he died in like 2010. I have no idea what happened to him. But anyways, with his dismissal of charges, the case went cold and has stayed cold with no credible suspects. There have been some unofficial investigations taken on by retired officers and internet sleuths. Retired Chicago police officer James Hannigan launched a Facebook page to investigate the murders. His theory is that the Grimes sisters' murders were connected to the murder of those 3 boys, John and Anton Schuessler and Robert Peterson. Another retired officer named Raymond Johnson, who is considered an expert on the case, named Charles Leroy Melquist as the likely perpetrator. Charles was considered a suspect back in 1957, but he was never questioned because his attorney didn't allow him to talk, so he was just simply let go. A little over a year later, though, Charles was convicted of the murder of 15-year-old Bonnie Lee Scott. Her decapitated body was found 2 months after her disappearance, about 10 miles from where Barbara and Patricia were found. The day after Bonnie was found, Loretta Grimes got a phone call. On this phone call, the man claimed to have committed another perfect crime with the murder of Bonnie, and the cops won't solve it. Loretta recognized that voice because that same man, she swears, called her back in May of 1957. In that call, the caller claimed to have undressed and killed her daughters. He also ridiculed police for suspecting Edward Bedwell of the crimes. Before laughing and hanging up, he said, quote, "I know something about your little girl that no one else knows, not even the police. The smallest girl's toes were crossed at the feet," end quote. And this was true. No one else knew this information. Charles Melquist ended up being sentenced to 99 years in prison for the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott. He only served 11 years for good behavior. He decapitated a child.
I'm sorry. What? He served 11 years out of his 90 plus year sentence?
From 99 to 11. Yep.
Any explanation?
He was just such a good boy in prison, I guess.
Oh, okay.
He decapitated a child.
Yeah, luckily things have gotten a little better since the 50s.
I'm sorry. That is not okay.
No, and he lived until 2010.
But
No, he
common sense was
didn't.
around in the 50s. Like, what the fuck?
No one killed him? I'm really shocked no one killed
Yeah.
him.
So, unfortunately, in this case, it seems that even if we could name a killer with 100% certainty, any suspect is long gone. There's no physical evidence, not even an agreed upon cause of death. Loretta Grimes publicly stated that the girls must have been murdered by someone they knew simply because they would have never gotten into a car with a stranger, no matter how cold it was outside. The girls also had money for the bus. There's no evidence that any of the suspects we talked about knew the girls, but those who did and loved them really stepped up. Everyone from friends, neighbors, classmates, and church members volunteered to search and pass out flyers. They also raised money to pay for Loretta's mortgage and the funeral and burial of the girls. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were buried on January 28th, 1957, where they remain waiting for us to connect the dots. And that was a very perplexing story, an unsolved story, of the murders of Barbara and Patricia Grimes.
I don't think that they died from outdoor hypothermia exposionness. I definitely think something sketchy happened. Second off, did they actually interview Elvis?
I think Elvis had a pretty tight alibi if he was at Graceland,
Okay, just making sure.
but maybe they should have questioned Elvis.
You never know.
I'm sure, obviously, medical knowledge has improved since 1957, and I'm sure like a more thorough autopsy would probably have revealed
Yeah.
the cause of death.
It's just
Mhm.
interesting that they couldn't see it physically since the girls were both in the nude. You know, like you would think there'd be like strangulation marks or something like that. So that being said, I don't want to think that it maybe was natural like causes like that, but like that would just be weird. That would just I don't know. I don't know what to think.
The only thing I can think of is like, okay, like knocked over the head, not enough to kill them, but enough to like knock them out, and then they did just die from being left out in the cold, passed out. That's like the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, but like how cold are we actually talking?
Like below freezing in Chicago
Oh, okay,
winters.
never mind. Never mind. Never mind.
Yeah. That one's very confusing. I have no idea. Let us know your thoughts, guys. But
Yeah.
we will jump into overtime.
I just want to let you guys know that I did just chat GPT a picture of Andy's legs, and it says that no, she is not bow-legged. It's a natural curve because the bones are curved at this age.
Ew.
I'm surprised you didn't already know that.
I don't think I've ever stared this hardcore and thought something's
Guys,
wrong.
it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Holly, did you
And
say
now they
ew?
have, yes, now they got curved bones. I can't. Kate, really?
Wait, Holly, have you ever seen a photo of like a infant or like a toddler's like x-ray?
How
And
many
like none of
bones they
the
have?
when like none of the bones are like connected.
Ew. Freaking sick. And they're like malleable. I can't. That's so sick. I'm no, y'all. Actually, I'm getting cold chills. Look, just from thinking about that soft spot on a baby's head. Like there's nothing. Oh, okay. Let's change the subject, guys. Please.
Holly's disgusted by babies.
I'm sorry, Andy.
Yeah, Andy's literally sitting on my lap right now, for those who can't tell. And
Sorry.
more than half of the story, Millie was also sitting on my lap. So tell that to your nieces, Holly.
Uh, guys, I'm sorry. I'll like you more when you're a little bit more developed and your bones have come together.
When you're fully grown.
Yeah. Yeah, when we can chill, you know?
When we can go get margaritas and gossip.
Kate, are you gonna have another baby?
Oh, I totally thought I was on mute this entire time, so I'm very sorry. I was just talking to the child.
Oh, it's okay.
Um,
I had somebody in my house the other day. I'll go back. I had somebody in my house the other day and he was working on something and he left. And then I didn't know he forgot something. He came back. I was in my bathroom and I was singing. I was singing to the dogs, putting their names in the song. And I walk out. I mean, I'm singing so loud. It's just, I can't remember what song it was. Oh, yes, I do remember actually. It was the song that was,
Go ahead and sing it.
to
Go ahead
all
and sing
the
it.
that hate me the most. Oh yeah, I
Oh yeah,
hate you
I hate you
too.
too.
To all the, and I was putting Butter's name in there. I
Doses
was
and
like,
mimosas.
yeah. So I was putting Butter's name every time there was like anywhere I could. Anyways, so yeah, a
Shout
guy
out the
working in my
song
house.
Doses and Mimosas by Cherub.
Yeah, it's Tori's
Insert
favorite
that in
song.
here, Kylie.
Copyright.
Oh,
Yeah.
damn it.
I'm
We'll
gonna
just
put a
have to
little
sing it. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, quick question. If you guys are singing in the car and you're stopped at a red light, do you stop singing in case someone's watching?
Yes.
Yes. Or when
Yep.
I pass someone on the interstate too, like I do kind of stop. I kind of chill out for a second.
I will
Yeah, when
say
they're like
though,
side by side, yeah, I stop.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say if I am stopped somewhere and someone next to me is singing, I will slightly roll down my window to try to figure out if they're on a radio station that I'm also on, because it's my dream to sing the same song with someone next to me, like have one of those movie moments.
Wait, you listen to the radio?
Yes.
She does,
Okay.
and I honestly don't even think my car has radio. I've never found it.
What do you
Oh my
mean? What
gosh.
do I listen to?
Y'all know that I'm going through that buyback process with my car. So I had to drive my grandma's car to Little Rock. It was just me and my thoughts.
No radio?
Oh.
There was a radio, but I mean, like, what? I'm not going to do that. That's sorry, Kate. That's just embarrassing. I
Wait,
just
what's
can't.
the other option?
Like
I,
Spotify, Apple Music?
Oh, okay. Here's my thing. Here's my thing. Hear me out on this one. Cameron and I share a Spotify account. So anytime I'm in the car, Cameron's a real estate agent. He tends to be in the car a lot. So anytime I'm in the car, Cameron is using the music and I can't get it on my end.
yeah, that used to happen with me and my dad. I had to kick him off.
I know what we're getting Kate for her birthday, her own Spotify account. I do want to talk about that fucking horse girl documentary on Netflix. What the fuck was that?
That was
Okay.
wild.
What the fuck was that? But also, what the fuck was that? Okay, the dude, first of all, he's gay. Like, there's no way he's not gay, but he's been married to two. That don't mean you're not gay. But he came off very flamboyant. And second of all, what a drama queen.
That
Mm-hmm.
the girl is batshit crazy, and the
She's
guy
crazy.
is also batshit crazy and was 100% acting in a show.
When I saw the video of him at trial, I was like, that's not the same person.
No, he like grew his hair out. He looked homeless.
Okay, for people who don't know what we're talking about, there is a new documentary that got released on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember?
It's something like shooting at Hawthorne Hill.
But it's called the Horse Girl documentary. And go watch it. It's a weird one. It's not something I would normally be like, I don't know that I wouldn't promote it, but like it doesn't end how you think we're probably gonna end the story. But like let's just say all parties involved are nuts.
Guys, I have to say, I have to admit, I stopped watching it. It did not pique my interest.
It didn't pique mine either.
No, it was honestly a very boring story, but the only reason I kept watching it was because I was like, these people are batshit crazy.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do
Yeah.
next? When the girl, like within the first 5 minutes, the way she was talking to her boyfriend, I was like, oh my God, she scares me.
Well, the way she looked at for me.
Everything.
You know how like sometimes now don't for anyone listening, we love horses on this show. Some of us have ridden prior. You can consider horse girls, but there is a certain type of horse girl, the ones that get the bad reps, that happen to also look like horses themselves. This was one of those girls.
Oh, this is diabolical. We may have to cut this.
Shots fired. I'm not cutting that.
Yeah.
She wasn't the best. She wasn't the best looking, but she was not so crazy. The whole documentary itself wasn't like something I would normally watch. I think I also would have cut it off, but it was so much drama. And the dude was just crazy. He put on an acting show. He shot someone, claimed he was insane, got off of it. I'm telling you the whole story. Don't even watch it. But she got shot. I don't even know how she survived. She got shot like 3 times in the abdomen and should have been dead. Anyways,
Horse.
weird. Just go look it up. Don't watch it. Go look it up.
Yeah, just watch like the trailer, watch a little clip. You'll
Yeah,
That's all you
you'll
need to see.
understand what we're talking about.
Just these people are
Very
crazy.
anticlimactic.
But thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, follow, all those things. And we'll see you next week with a new episode and a new case. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.